Let's look at some more vocabulary that's related to experimental design here. A placebo is a treatment that either cannot or at least shouldn't influence your response variable. So if you're looking at medication trials, this is your sugar pill, your innocuous treatment that should have no effect. The control group is the group that receives the placebo. And then the treatment group is the group that receives the active treatment. So this would be the actual medication. Blinding is when the treatment is not disclosed. Now you can have single blinding where it's not disclosed only to the subjects, but the researchers know what's going on. Or you can have double blind experiment in which neither the researcher nor the subject knows who is receiving which treatment. Now, double-blinded experiments will give you stronger results because there's no opportunity for the subject to be influenced by thinking, "Oh, I'm getting the active medication. This is really going to work." That's going to distort the results. And then also, if the researcher knows which subject is getting which treatment, they may treat them differently, sort of give them cues as to what treatment they're receiving. That also can distort the results of the experiment. A lurking variable here, think of something that's lurking, it's kind of hanging around, and that's the idea. It's lurking in the background. We got a variable here. It's not the explanatory and it's not the response variable, so it's not one of the experimental variables, but it affects the relationship between the explanatory and response variables. So sometimes this lurking variable, this third variable, and there can be more than one, is distorting the effects in the experiment, and we're not aware of it. And then a confounding variable is a variable that's considered in the study, okay, but whose effects on your response variable can't be distinguished from one of the explanatory variables that's in the study. So confounding variables are going to make it sometimes difficult or even impossible to draw valid conclusions about each one of your factors. So the difference here is that lurking variables are variables that they're not considered, and sometimes we're not even aware of them, whereas confounding variables, they're considered in the study, we are aware of them, but we may not be able to assess their effects. So let's look at our example here again. So this is example 1 again, and we want to know what is our placebo here. So the sociologist is dividing the at-risk teens into two groups. One group receives mentoring and the other group does not. So the placebo, the thing that's acting like the sugar pill here, is no mentoring. So the mentoring is the active treatment. So then your control group, the group that receives the placebo, so here group 1 will participate in the teen mentoring, group 2 will not. So group 2 is our control group. And then is it possible to use blinding in this study? Probably not, because the subjects are going to know whether or not they're receiving mentoring. It's either you either get the mentoring program or you get nothing. So if they're getting nothing, they know that they're not receiving the mentoring that the treatment group is getting. What about any lurking variables here that could interfere with this study? So the only variables that we've mentioned up here are receiving mentoring or not, that's your explanatory variable, and then number of crimes committed, that's your response variable. So we want to think what other variables could affect what's going on in this scenario that we have not considered. And there's lots of things that could go in here. So lurking variables could be socioeconomic status, So, if families that have more money, students may be less inclined to commit crimes. There may be a relationship there. Whether or not there's a father in the household. So that certainly could have an effect on what's going on. We haven't considered that variable. And there may be several others, but there's two possibilities right there that could affect our experimental results.